Okay, for this section of algebra, we are dealing with quadratic equations. So basically, we will be dealing with how to solve quadratic equation, and also it will lead you to some problem solving in quadratic equation. So that kind of question will be quite long. Okay, so I will start you off with the steps of solving quadratic equation and the terminology involved first. So okay, so we will be dealing with the general format of a quadratic equation. So you may be thinking, so what do you mean by general format? Later on, you will be, when you go upper set, there will be other format of quadratic equation. So that this format that we are dealing with is called the general format. So the general format is always like okay, we will try to be very organized. We will always have the highest power first. And then this is the coefficient of x squared. And then followed by x. And this is the coefficient of x. B is the coefficient of x. C is a constant. So we will try to be very organized. We'll always put the highest power first. So x squared, x, and constant. Okay, so you don't get mixed up. Okay. Now what we meant by solving quadratic equation, right? We are going to find the values of x. Because this is quadratic, you will be getting two x values. Okay, so in set 1, you learn linear equation, so you only got one answer. So for quadratic equation, okay, we have quadratic equation, we will have two answers. Okay, and there's a special name to the values of x. So the values of x, right, are known as the roots of the equation, or sometimes we will say that these are the solutions of the equations. Okay, then what are the steps to solve a quadratic equation by factorization? It's actually very easy. All the x has to be on the left side. So the left side should be all the x. Then the 0 will be on the right side. So, and we will organize them in such a way that it's ax squared, bx, and c. So all the x has to be on the left side. The 0 must be on the right side. So this 0 part is a must. Or else you will get tricked by some question. Okay, and then after that, your job is to factorize. So the one on the left side will be factorized. So how will you go through the factorization? So you already learned 4 methods. So you apply the 4 methods of the factorization. But most of the time, you find that you are using the cross factorize or the multiplication phrase. Okay, I'm just saying most of the time. But the truth is, right, it can be any of the 4 methods. Okay, after you manage to factorize, your job is to set each bracket to 0. Okay, I'm going to call the first bracket a star. I'm going to call the second bracket a moon. So you will set the star to 0. You will get 1 x value. Or you will set the moon to 0 and you will get another x value. So it's actually as simple as that. Okay, you just don't twist from the steps. Actually solving quadratic is quite easy. Okay, if you are thinking, why must it be a 0? Okay, so if any one of you is thinking, why must it be a 0? Because, okay, if you can accept the understanding, you accept. If you think that's going to confuse you, right, you ignore this explanation. So why must it be a 0? So to us, right, when we have two brackets, it is like a product. So something times something equal to 0. So 0 is quite a special number. So when will a product equal to 0? A product can be equal to 0 when the first bracket is 0, or when the second bracket is 0, or maybe both are 0. So that is the logic we use to solve it. it cannot be equal to any other number. So for example, why it cannot be 1? Why it cannot be 1? Because right, there's a lot of products that can give the answer 1. So for example, this one can be a 2, and then this one can be a half. When you multiply, you will get 1. Or maybe it can be a 3, and this one is a 1/3. The product is also a 1. So in fact, there's a lot of options that make you multiply to get a 1. So there are too many options to explore, so it's not possible for you to find the values of x. That's why you must always get to the 0 part, because it's very easy to get a product of 0. Anything that multiplied by a 0 will be a 0. So the only time when product becomes 0 is when either of the bracket becomes 0. So we make use of this logic. That's why the 0 is a must. Okay, they will trick student. They will trick student by not giving you a 0 on the right side. And then we'll see how many students are being tricked. So it's actually very simple. Factorize equal to 0. First bracket equal to 0. Second bracket equal to 0. As long as you stay focused with the method, don't twist to other stuff that's not mentioned here. So I'm going to show some numerical example. So if you look at 1a, we already see bracket equal to 0. So I don't need to factorize. They already factorize for us. So to me, right, this is like 2 brackets. To me, this one is like a product. So a product equal to 0. So a product can be equal to 0 when the first bracket is equal to 0 or the second bracket is equal to 0. So from here, you can do your Sec 1 algebra. So you will get 2 answers. Okay, so the next one is the same thing. They already gave you factorize for you. That means effectively you already gotten a product, and the product is equal to 0. So a bracket multiplied by a bracket will become 0 when the first bracket is equal to 0 or the second bracket is equal to 0. So it's actually very simple. The next one is also a 0, and this is also a product. 3x is also a product. So 3x, so a product equal to 0 will happen when 3x equal to 0. That means this is a 0. So 0 multiplied by a bracket, that will give us 0. So 3x equal to 0 or 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. So 0 divided by 3 is a 0. Then from here, your solving is like your Sec 1 solving. The next one is also a product that is already a 0. So it can be the first bracket equal to the 0 or second bracket equal to 0. So if you are getting a product equal to 0, it's very direct. So we are making use of the logic bracket times bracket equal to 0 to solve for quadratic equation. Okay, let's go to example 2 where there's no factorization done. Okay, so there's no factorization done. So you just make sure that there's an equal to 0 first. So then you gotta be thinking, out of the 4 methods, what can you factorize? So in this question, right, I'll be using the take out common factor. So remember there are 4 methods. So I can do a take out common factor and I get 2 brackets. So I get a product equal to 0. So bracket times bracket equal to 0. So it will become a 0 when x is equal to 0 or when 4x minus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, so that's one of the basic method of factorization. X squared minus 25. Okay, so x squared minus 25. Okay, we gotten the 0 already. So there was this method that we learned in the section on factorization. So I'm going to use this method. So if I use this method, I will get x plus 5, x minus 5. So I create a product. So bracket times bracket equal to 0. So first bracket can be a 0, or second bracket can be a 0. Okay, for this question, there is also an alternative. Okay, so some students may not use the factorization. So some students just move the 25 over and they take a square root. The opposite of a square is square root, but you must remember that there are two possible answers. Okay, why are there two possible answers for taking square root? Okay, so because you observe this, 5 square can give you a 25. Minus 5 square also give you a 25. So the possible answer for x will be 5 or minus 5. So if you are using the non-factorization method, you must remember taking square root will have two answers. Then the next one, we gotten the equal to 0 already. So obviously this one looks like the cross multiplication or the multiplication frame. So do your own working. By now, you should be quite good with it. By now, I think you should be able to mental. You should be able to mentor, or maybe you'll be faster in your cross multiplication, or you'll be faster in multiplication frame. So this is a product equal to 0. First bracket is equal to 0. Or second bracket is equal to 0. Okay, so this will be the approach. This one is the cross method. Okay, and then the second one is a square minus b square. The first one is the take out common factor. Okay, here I also have an equal to 0. Okay, and obviously this one is again, it looks like your cross multiplication method. Okay, so you go and do the cross multiplication method. So I will be getting something like this. Okay, so you do your cross multiplication carefully. Not cross multiplication, sorry. Cross factorization. Okay, let me do a double check. Yeah. Okay, so when you do that successfully, as long as you create two bracket equal to 0, that means now you already create a product. So the first bracket can be a 0, or the second bracket is equal to a 0. Okay, so what could have gone wrong? If you factorize wrongly, obviously wrong. Okay, part E, we do not have the equal to 0. So you just shuffle back all the items. Remember, shift everything to the left side. So I shift all the X onto the left side. The number is also on the left side. I must make sure I got the 0. Then I go for my cross factorization. So I must get a minus. Okay, so I'm mentaling out the cross factorization. You do your own. Okay, so two brackets equal to 0. First bracket can be a 0. Second bracket can be a 0. So that's how we get the two answers. The last one here, okay, they kind of factorize nicely already. So it is already a product. So bracket times bracket equal to 0. So the first bracket can be a 0, or the second bracket is a 0. So essentially, that's how we solve a very, very basic quadratic equation. Of course, there are some quadratic equations that's a bit more confusing. Okay, but this one will be the basic that you should be able to follow and solve accurately with no careless mistake.